It's interesting that I'm starting a Robert Duvall retrospective with a Gene Roddenberry anecdote. But this is when they were casting for the next generation and they landed upon Patrick Stewart. And sort of in the press conference, there they are fielding questions. And a reporter asks Roddenberry whether, sort of in the 23rd century, or was it the 24th century, they would have cured male pattern baldness. And Roddenberry's terse reply was they wouldn't care. And that is, I think, I mean, not to say that sort of balding is a disability or anything like that or a handicap, but I mean, despite not being sort of atypically handsome or sort of having leading man characteristics, there was something about Duvall that was easy on the eye. You know, sort of those narrow slit like eyes, that sort of almost awkward, shy smile. I mean, sort of like, it was always a raising of the cheek. I mean, you could, I mean, you almost felt that there was like sort of this old Western sort of cowboy sensibility to the way he carried himself. And no wonder that he starred in so many Westerns. But besides that, I mean, sort of his range, his body of work was pretty much everything. I mean, from sort of Westerns like, of course, Lonesome Dove, the television series, Broken Trail, Open Range. I mean, he starred as Eisenhower, he starred as Stalin, he was in Days of Thunder, MASH, THX 738, The Judge with Robert Downey, Geronimo, Network. Uh, what else? What else? What else? I mean, God, I mean, there's just been so many movies over the course of, I would say, almost like a 50 plus year career. Of course, we learnt of the demise of this great actor yesterday, where he passed away at the ripe old age of 95. May we all live that long. Of course, this retrospective can't uh, cover everything that he's done. I'm, of course, going to limit it to a handful of movies. Two, of course, are very well known performances, two are lesser known. But I think that it's always good to see an actor sort of not on his good days or bad days, but just show that despite the vehicle, they show up. They are, you know, they are there. Like, I mean, they are the actor, it is the actor, regardless of the scale of that movie. We will, of course, start with the most obvious one, which is, of course, The Godfather 1 and 2. Of course, he unfortunately did not return for 3. In the first two installments of Francis Ford Coppola's American epic, he plays the character of Tom Hagen, the family consigliere, somebody who Don Vito took off the street. And of course, as you can tell by the name, he's not Italian, he's Irish, of Irish descent. But he's brought into the family. He's made a part of it. And he eventually, goes through law school, becomes the family lawyer, and becomes the family's trusted advisor. Um, Amidst that sort of Sicilian energy and dysfunction, he serves as this voice of calm, as perhaps the second adult in the room after Don Vito, because we all know how sort of emotional in very different ways the Corleone children are. Um, of course, when they do go to the mattresses, he is no longer, well, I mean, I'm not saying he is no longer a part of the family, but he is not a wartime consigliere, as Michael so says with such finality. And while not shut out, of course, he's there in the second movie, still serving in that role. Um, it's a movie that is most definitely an ensemble piece because you have such stellar acting from everyone. from Khan, from James Khan to what's it called? What's the other brother's name? Not, of course, Pacino, but the other one. Oh my God. It's there on the tip of my tongue, but I'm forgetting. Marlon Brando, Talia Shire, all of these people. Not Kay, not Diane Keaton. I've never liked her. Forget that person. But you have such performances, such personalities, such characters represented in all of these people. And then, of course, you have Tom Hagen, who, again, I mean, sort of, there's this cool about him. There is this presence that I think is of equal standing with everybody else. Of course, we were, I would say, robbed, and robbed for all the wrong reasons. A return performance by Duvall in the third Godfather. Of course, regardless of how you may feel about that movie, its legacy, I think now, after all these years, we've maybe come to accept the movie. Coppola recently, not recently, but in the recent past, um, he released the what was it? I think the director's cut or something like that. It was another version. I mean, did that improve on the movie? I wouldn't say so, but I mean, it at least reminded us that while not in that same rarefied air as the first two movies, wasn't bad. I mean, sure, everyone gives Sofia Coppola, I know that is a bit of an aside, grief for her performance in that, But as to why Duvall didn't return, because again, we had Pacino, we had Talia Shire. Um, he didn't return because of, unfortunately, a a disagreement on payment. I mean, in the first two films, I think he was okay with Pacino getting a higher paycheck. But I think third time around, when of course, I mean, sort of like, that movie was made, I think like there's almost about 15 years apart between the last one and the third one. I mean, they're both gained great status as actors, and I don't think he was willing to compromise on that. And so the character was written out of the script, which is a shame because it would have been really good to see, I mean, sort of where Tom Hagen's character would have ended up. Now that, of course, at the start of the third film, we saw that Michael is almost in semi retirement and sort of I got sucked back in and all that stuff. So, yeah, that was, of course, The Godfather. The second movie, of course, is going to be Apocalypse Now. It's a cameo at best. Let's be frank, but it is such a standout performance. Something that very much like Brando towards the end of the movie, who is of course Kurt's in it, who's barely there for like 10 minutes. I mean, the movie, which had even like sort of bit parts played by like for like the likes of Harrison Ford. I mean, kind of benefited, I mean, sort of almost fed off of these sort of cameo slash bit parts. Duvall, of course, plays the air cav colonel, or the Bruce Kilgore, fantastic name. And we all remember him, of course, because the thing is, he's given Pat one of the most iconic scenes in cinema, where in order to get Martin Sheen's character to, sort of the start of his journey into the heart of darkness. There you have the air cav launch, and sort of, it's Ride of the Valkyries is playing, and they go, they palm the shit out of those Vietnamese, they napalm those villages, and there, because Martin Sheen's team has a sort of celebrated surfer with them, the colonel is insistent that he rides some waves for them. He puts his talents on display, and so they make artificial waves by again bombing, dropping bombs into the sea, and insisting this guy, of course, surf. And then we get, of course, the iconic line, I love the smell of napalm in the morning, shirtless, wearing cavalry hat. Um, Duval is there with his aviators on. sort of staring off into the distance. He doesn't have that thousand mile stare yet. There's more death and destruction in this man's life. And we get that line. And sort of, as the kids say, it lives rent free in our minds. Um, I think one of the most iconic scenes in cinema. Another movie which you guys will question why I'm adding into this, but I've spoken about this on the channel before. I remember speaking about this in the context of, God, I don't even remember. Maybe I was comparing it with Armageddon. But the movie I'm talking about is 1998's Deep Impact. Um, an interesting one. I will tell you this because the thing is that, I mean, sort of, I was going to say if Armageddon is sort of the Michael Bay, not even say elder brother, but I mean the Michael Bay sibling of sort of asteroid movies, which it literally was, then Deep Impact is the somewhat refined, uh, not definitely not younger brother, but sort of like, the quiet, more thoughtful sibling. It's an interesting one because while Armageddon was all show and pomp and Aerosmith and Liv Tyler and sort of this inane plot, there was far more realism and I would say less sort of histrionics. Of course, the reason why I'm bringing up this movie and including in this retrospective is that Duvall's character is really interesting. It's almost like, oh God, what is that? Aging, not Scott Glenn. Was it Scott Glenn? No, that's the actor. The astronaut. Wow, these names used to be on the tip of my tongue. Um, but that aging astronaut who later on went into space because he was part of course, Gemini and Mercury and all of those things. And then he went, okay, so Duval plays an astronaut with the fantastic name of Spurgeon Tanner. You can't beat that. And he's brought out of retirement to lead the rescue mission. Of course, the rescue mission involves heading straight for that asteroid and sort of splitting it in half with a couple of nuclear bombs. Now, the reason why this role stood out for me and why I remember it so much and associate it with Duval is because here is, and sort of for a more recent sort of frame of reference, I mean, sort of, it's like Top Gun Maverick in that you have the older, experienced uh, person coming in, sort of, I'm not going to say a has been, but like an unk, as the kid would say, like, the person who's, he's an old timer, he's done it all. I mean, sort of, and the young bucks are always like, sort of, why is this person, we don't need this guy. But he comes in and there is a sort of natural, I think, resentment from the rest of the crew. Because again, I don't think this guy's flown a mission in donkey's years. And here he is brought in. There's an aspect of, I think, optics, I think, because the thing is that in this fictional world, this astronaut is much beloved by the public. And so sort of it is a it is a way to perhaps reassure them, to sort of give the public confidence that maybe we will be able to pull through because you have such a name brand astronaut. It's almost like having, again, I'm forgetting the name of sort of that Neil Armstrong contemporary. I'm forgetting his name, but it's like having somebody like that, like a living legend, come back out of retirement to save the world. And you know, during the course of the movie. And what's it called? King feels it because the thing is that his character, he's widowed. I don't think he has any kids. And so for him, I mean, this being less of a suicide run, I think Duval's character realizes that sort of while he's up to the task, he is expendable. And, there is that sort of, again, I keep on saying it, that this is almost cowboy charm to him. Spurgeon Tanner, I mean, with a name like that, this dude's from Texas. So, I mean, he carries that with him. In the movie, he I mean, there is a spoiler. I don't know if you want to call this a spoiler alert. You guys may or may not have seen the movie, but it's worth watching. I would suggest you do. But he, at a point comes when, you know, they kind of fail in their mission. Like, I mean, sort of like, there's a setback. They aren't able to actually sort of get the bombs there on, in sort of, they aren't able to do what they were supposed to do. And sort of a point comes when they have to make a decision. And Duval, again, being the adult in the room, he's the one with a very level head, because everyone else on the team, their families back home, right? The lead, the lead astronaut. I mean, sort of, I think, well, the lead pilot, if you will. He's blinded, so he's incapable of doing this. But Duval is the one who makes that decision, who makes that call, that like sort of, we are now, he steps up, he says, we are now called upon to like sort of do this to fulfill our mission. And sort of, yes, understandably, you guys have families back home, but I mean, sort of, the success of our mission will mean that sort of, everyone on earth gets to live. And it's a poignant moment. It's a heart touch. I felt it. I definitely felt it. And sort of, I, not saying that no other actor could have done that, but I mean, sort of Duval in that role, it was his. He did it. He owned it, and he does it. He does it in this quiet way. He does it with something that you often read about sort of astronauts back then, that they're sort of like, because they came from the military, very focused, very mission oriented, and they kind of understood the stakes. And Duval does a fantastic job at that, which is why, again, I had to mention him in that role. I loved it. It was pretty cool. I liked it a lot. It's a shame that he wasn't, you know, cast in Clint Eastwood's Space Cowboys, where he gets all of the older actors, it's the band back together. Okay, now of course we move to the movie that I think this in retrospective is entirely around, because of how much I felt the movie, but also how much I think that Duval was so perfectly suited to it. The movie, of course, is 1983's Tender Mercies. He won, and rightfully so, the Best Director award at the Oscars for this movie. It was directed by Bruce Beresford and written by Horton Foote. Um, and okay, I think I can do this without even having to look at this, because our, movie's very, Okay, so he plays a character called Max Sledge, a washed up country western singer, alcoholic, divorced, estranged from his only child. And sort of the opening scenes of this movie are of him waking up in this motel in God knows where, Texas. I think, yeah, it is Texas. Yeah. Uh, Waxahachie. Wow, what a name. If they, yeah, okay. And, sort of, this guy is literally at the end of his rope. I mean, he has nothing. Career's over, no family life what to speak of, and, an alcoholic to boot. There, of course, is this turning point for him, because the thing is that the owner of this motel, played by Tess Harper, he is a widow with a child, a young boy. Her husband died in Vietnam. He's running this motel, and I don't know what it is, but I mean, something in this man sort of leads him to sort of strike a bargain with her, where he offers his help around the motel, around the gas station, sort of upkeep, basically being a super, um, and sort of he can live rent free. That is, of course, the start of this story, where he, in this new chapter, if you will, um, quite removed from the life that he knew, because again, he was a celebrated singer, money, all of that stuff. But here it's almost like a bare bones existence. But in it, I think he's found that port in this maelstrom that is his life. He finds this calm that I think, this respite that he's been looking for all his life. Um, Slowly, of course, their relationship builds, and he becomes almost a surrogate father to the child. There's a romantic relationship building with this lady, and of course, there is another aspect to this man's turning over a new leaf, and that is, of course, faith. I don't think that he had much use for it in his other life, but in now coming into this rural, somewhat conservative community, he is finding that again. Um, I mean, sort of, sure, different strokes for different folks. I mean, whoever, whatever you may find in whatever religion you profess, but in this, he finds that this is exactly what maybe he's been lacking all his life, what he's been needing. And there is, of course, tumult along the way because, people soon discover that this guy is Max Sledge, famous guy. Reporters are out looking for him, sort of how did he go from the size of, the country and western stage to like, being, sort of a helping hand at a motel. But I mean, and that life comes back for him. And it comes back for him in the form of his wife, who is still a performing artist, but then also his 18-year-old daughter, who, again, he's been completely estranged from, having never seen her since he left home. They form this fleeting relation because in coming back into his life, she unfortunately is taken away from him because in eloping with her boyfriend, they have a car accident and she dies. And here is a man who is first perhaps welcoming of this new life with a new family and finding something that he never had. And here, with the hope of having potentially, sort of reformed relationship with his now adult daughter, he has lost her. And that is where both the film, the writing, but then also the acting really shines through. That's where Duvall really shines through. Because, I mean, much like I keep on saying this, that there's this sort of old school Western charm to the guy, he does hate these ups and downs with the sort of very, like, it's almost stoic approach. He is, tight-lipped about it, but he's dealing with it. I mean, there's a lot going on. He gets back into, sort of writing music. At one point, sort of his stuff is rejected. They feel that it's too old school. People aren't going to like it anymore. But then sort of this band comes calling because they revere him so much, and he starts performing with them again. And sort of like, it's a performance on the level. I mean, sort of, in essence, the movie is a Western. It's a Western in the sense that sort of, I mean, you have these sort of archetypes with what's it called? Your typical gunslinger. They're reticent, they're laconic, they sort of bear things with this sort of tight-lipped grit. And yet the movie has no, of course, fisticuffs or gunslinging or bullets or something like that. It is a movie of a man coming to terms with the decisions he's made in his life, um, and those decisions haunting him to the present day. It is a fine movie. It is a wonderful performance. It is Duvall, I think, out of everything that he's done. This, for me, is something that I will forever remember him by. And very much like the title itself, Tender Mercies, that is exactly, I think, what the movie embodies. That sort of like, it's not all a bed of roses. It's this sort of getting by day to day, dealing with those struggles, and sort of, doing so with this Duvall esque charm of sort of like, sort of, it's that smile. I mean, he had a winning smile, and I'll always remember him for it.